Hey everyone, welcome back to Steve's View. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most dramatic stories unfolding in Europe, a political crisis in France that looks straight out of a political thriller. France, a nation that prides itself on its revolutionary spirit, is once again watching its government collapse, this time, not on the streets with barricades and protests, but inside the marble halls of power. In early October, France's newly appointed Prime Minister, Sébastien Lecornu, saw his government crumble, not after weeks or months of political infighting, but in less than 12 hours. Yeah, you heard that right. A government that didn't even make it through the first day. So what happened? Why is President Emmanuel Macron, once seen as the energetic reformer who would modernize France, now standing on the edge of political paralysis? And most importantly, what does this mean for France's democracy, and maybe even for Europe's future? Let's break it down. Before we get into the chaos, let's do a quick crash course in how the French government actually works. France operates under what's called the Fifth Republic, a semi-presidential system established by Charles de Gaulle in 1958. That means France has both a president and a prime minister. The president, currently Emmanuel Macron, serves as the head of state. He oversees foreign policy, defense, and the overall direction of the country. The prime minister, appointed by the president, acts as the head of government, responsible for domestic affairs, running ministries, and getting legislation through parliament. Here's the catch. For a government to actually function, it needs the support of a majority in the National Assembly, France's lower house of parliament. If the prime minister loses that support, the opposition can file a motion of no confidence, which can topple the government, just like what we're watching now. And this is exactly Macron's nightmare. Since 2022, his centrist alliance has lost its absolute majority. He's been forced to rely on fragile coalitions and political deals just to keep governing. Let's rewind to early October 2025. Macron had just appointed a new prime minister, Sébastien Lecornu, a relatively low-profile but loyal technocrat. The hope was that Lecornu could calm the waters and form a national unity government, something broad enough to include moderates from both the right and the left. But things unraveled immediately. Within hours of announcing his cabinet, the Republicans, France's traditional conservative party, went into open revolt. Here's the drama. Lecornu's team included Bruno Le Maire, a former finance minister under Macron who was deeply unpopular among conservatives. Le Maire was blamed for France's massive national debt and years of tight budgets. When conservatives saw his name back on the list, and even more shockingly, as the new defense minister, they exploded. The Republican Party's chairman, Gérard Larcher, and its parliamentary leader, Laurent Wauquiez, immediately clashed over whether their party should stay in the coalition. The internal feud got so bad that the newly appointed Interior Minister, Bruno Retailleau, was forced to call an emergency meeting of party leaders. Just 3 hours after the new cabinet was announced, by the end of that meeting, the coalition had disintegrated. Lecornu's government, less than half a day old, was dead on arrival. To understand why this all happened, you have to look at Macron's shrinking circle of influence. When he was first elected in 2017, Macron's image was that of a centrist reformer, pro-business, pro-Europe, and anti-establishment. He broke away from both the traditional left and right, creating his own movement, La République En Marche, which was later rebranded as Renaissance. It worked brilliantly, at first. He crushed both major parties and positioned himself as the new face of French politics. But by 2024, that momentum had completely evaporated. His alliance lost dozens of seats in parliament. The left-wing New Popular Front became the largest bloc, and the far-right National Rally, led by Marine Le Pen, surged in popularity. That left Macron stuck in the middle, with no majority and no easy allies. So when he asked Lecornu to form a government that could ensure national stability, he was basically asking him to perform a miracle, build a coalition among parties that openly despise each other. The Republicans were divided between those who wanted to cooperate with Macron and those, like Wauquiez, who saw any alliance as political suicide. The left refused outright to work with Macron unless he agreed to reverse his signature pension reform, which raised the retirement age, something deeply unpopular with the public. And the far right, they simply wanted the whole system to collapse so they could force new elections. In short, Macron had no cards left to play. French political analysts describe what's happening as a slow-motion collapse of the Fifth Republic. One prominent political scientist told Le Monde, "France no longer has a functioning government. What it has is a series of negotiations disguised as leadership." Macron has now given Le Cornu 48 hours until Wednesday night to salvage some sort of governing agreement. If that fails, the president says he'll take full responsibility, which in French politics can mean three things. 1. Appoint another prime minister, though few want the job. 2. Dissolve parliament and call for new elections. 3. Or, in the most dramatic scenario, resign. Each option carries serious risks. Scenario 1. Try again with Le Cornu. If Le Cornu somehow manages to cobble together a coalition, Macron might just reappoint him as prime minister. But this would require convincing moderates from both sides to agree on a stability pact, something that feels increasingly unlikely. Even if Le Cornu survives the first week, opposition parties have already signaled they'll file a no-confidence motion immediately. So in other words, any new government could be gone before it even begins. Scenario 2. A left-wing government. Since the 2024 snap elections, the left-wing alliance, known as the New Popular Front, has been the largest force in parliament. They've demanded that Macron appoint one of their own as prime minister, arguing that it's the democratic choice. The Socialists and the Greens have repeated that call this week, saying that cohabitation, when the president and prime minister come from opposing political camps, is Macron's only way out. But here's the problem. The left itself is divided. The Socialists and the Greens want moderate reform. The far left, France Unbowed Party, led by Jean-Luc Mélenchon, wants radical change, including repealing Macron's pension reform and nationalizing parts of the economy. That's why Macron has resisted this option so fiercely. If he lets the far left into power, they could undo nearly everything he's worked for. Scenario 3. Dissolve parliament. The nuclear option. If Macron dissolves the National Assembly, France will go to new elections, probably within a few months. But this move could backfire spectacularly. The last time he tried it, in 2024, his alliance lost almost 100 seats. The far right gained dozens. A new election now could hand Marine Le Pen's national rally an outright majority, putting her just one step away from the presidency in 2027. Le Pen herself has already called for new elections, saying, "Let the people decide. France can no longer live under this chaos." It's a clever move. The far right knows that the public is exhausted with political gridlock, and that voters often punish whoever's in power. Scenario 4. Macron resigns. While still unlikely, the idea of Macron stepping down is no longer unthinkable. Pressure is mounting, not just from the far left and far right, but even from within the center-right establishment. One Republican vice president posted on X, formerly Twitter, "In the name of France's interest, Macron must take responsibility and resign." Even Marine Le Pen, who usually calls for his removal, recently said, "I haven't demanded Macron's resignation. But if he did, it might be the wisest decision." Of course, under the French Constitution, removing a president is extremely complicated. It would require a two-thirds majority in both houses of parliament, something no one currently has. Still, the symbolism of these calls matters. It shows how isolated Macron has become and how fragile France's political center now is. One of the most striking parts of this saga is the downfall of Bruno Retailleau, the short-lived interior minister. For years, Retailleau was a relatively unknown conservative lawmaker, but when he was appointed interior minister, his tough stance on law and order quickly made him one of the most popular figures on the right. He used that visibility to seize control of his party, pushing aside his rival, Wauquiez, and positioning himself for the 2027 presidential race. Now, his collapse after the government's 12-hour downfall has flipped the power balance again. Wauquiez, who refused to join the government, looks like the one who made the smart move. Even former President Nicolas Sarkozy stepped in to say Wauquiez was right. That's how brutal French politics can be. One wrong alliance can end a career overnight. Behind all of this political drama lies an economic story. France's national debt has ballooned to nearly 115% of GDP, one of the highest in the European Union. Bruno Le Maire, the finance minister turned defense minister for a day, is blamed by many on the right for years of fiscal mismanagement. Public anger over inflation, taxes, and stagnant wages continues to erode trust in the political class. So when Macron tries to preach stability, many French citizens simply roll their eyes. From their perspective, it's just another elite shuffle while the cost of living keeps rising. Polls show that a majority of French voters, nearly 60%, now favor dissolving parliament and holding new elections. But here's the twist. Those same polls also show that most people don't actually trust any of the major parties to fix the problem. The far right is leading in popularity but still viewed as risky. The far left is seen as chaotic, and Macron's centrists are widely regarded as out of touch. It's a political vacuum, and in French history, vacuums rarely end quietly. You might be wondering, why should Americans care about all this French political drama? Because France isn't just another European country. It's one of the EU's two main pillars, alongside Germany. It's a nuclear power, a permanent member of the UN Security Council, and a key ally of the US. If France enters a prolonged period of instability, it could shake Europe's ability to respond to global crises, from the war in Ukraine to tensions in the Indo-Pacific. And for Washington, Macron's weakness means a weaker partner on the world stage. If Macron becomes a lame duck, or worse, if France shifts sharply to the right or left, that balance could collapse. So where does this leave France? Right now, the country faces three overlapping crises. 1. A political crisis, no stable majority in parliament. 2. An economic crisis, rising debt and discontent over cost of living. 3. A social crisis, deep distrust between citizens and the political elite. It's not the kind of environment where reforms can thrive. And yet, that's exactly what Macron promised when he first took office. A new France that would be modern, dynamic, and united. 8 years later, he's running out of time and out of allies. If there's one thing history teaches us, it's that French politics loves drama. From the revolutions of the 18th and 19th centuries to the student uprisings of 1968, France has always had a talent for reinventing itself through crisis. Maybe this is just another chapter in that long story. Or maybe it's something more serious, a sign that the Fifth Republic itself is reaching the limits of what it can handle. For Macron, the question is simple, but brutal. Can he still lead a country that no longer wants to be led by him? As we wait for his next move, whether it's appointing another prime minister, dissolving parliament, or facing down calls for resignation, one thing's clear: France is once again at a crossroads. And as one French commentator put it, the revolution is always sleeping, but in France, it never sleeps for long. Thanks for watching. If you found this breakdown helpful, make sure to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. What do you think? Should Macron dissolve parliament and call for new elections? Or should he hang on and fight it out? Until next time, I'm Steve, and this is Steve's View. See you in the next video.